I'm Sienna Miller, I'm 33, and my own parents sued me because I refused to pay for my sister's $300,000 mortgage. It started with a letter I thought was junk mail until I saw my name tied to a debt I never agreed to. When I called them, their answer was simple: "You're making enough, you should help Harper." When I said no, they dragged me to court. What happened next tore my family apart. Before I tell you how I fought back and what I learned about family betrayal, where are you watching from? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. I was standing by my apartment door in Chicago, dropping my bag and kicking off my heels after a late shift. The envelope was thick cream-colored with a logo I didn't recognize. Probably another pre-approval scam, I thought, tearing it open with one hand while scrolling through work emails on my phone with the other. My eyes froze on the words. Loan amount $300,000, borrower Sienna Miller, property address 411 Oak Ridge Lane, Naperville, IL. Drive. Opt the envelope. It hit the floor with a soft slap that somehow felt loud in the quiet of my apartment. My stomach twisted. I had never applied for a mortgage. I hadn't even been to Naperville in years. I knelt, picking up the papers with shaking hands, flipping through page after page, each one stamped with my name, my address, my social security number. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I forced myself to inhale, counting to 5, trying not to panic. Identity theft, I told myself. Someone must have stolen my information. It was the only explanation that made sense. But when I looked closer, I saw the property listed wasn't just anywhere. It was my parents' street, their address. And Harper's name was listed as the co-owner. Harper, my younger sister, the one who had always found herself in chaos, who called me every time her car broke down, who always needed a little help with rent. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over my mom's contact. My pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I hit call. She picked up on the third ring. "Sienna, honey, you're calling late." "Everything okay, Mom? I just got some papers. Mortgage documents. With my name on them. For a house in Naperville. I didn't sign for this." There was a pause long enough that I could hear the clock ticking in my kitchen. "Oh, you got those already. That's good." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean that's good? What's going on?" Her voice changed, soft but tight, the way it always did when she was hiding something. "Sienna, this isn't something we should talk about over the phone. Why don't you come home tomorrow? We can have dinner and your dad and Harper will be there. We'll explain everything then." "No, Mom, this isn't a family dinner conversation. This is fraud. My name is on a $300,000 loan." She let out a sigh, one I had heard too many times when she thought I was overreacting. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Just come home, honey. We'll talk it through." Before I could say anything else, she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart pounding, the screen still lit with her name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and drank a glass of water, forcing myself to keep breathing. It took me 10 minutes to throw a bag together, grab my keys, and get in the car. The drive from Chicago to Rockford felt longer than it ever had, the highway lights blurring as I passed them, my mind running through every possibility, none of them good. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to block out the memories of every time I had been guilt-tripped into bailing Harper out. The calls about rent, the texts about bills, the "please don't tell Mom" and Dad whispers late at night. But this wasn't another $200. This was my future, my name, my credit, my life. I pulled off the highway, turning onto their street, the houses looking exactly as they always had, perfectly trimmed lawns and warm porch lights glowing in the dark. My parents' house was lit up like a postcard, but it felt cold, unfamiliar, wrong. I parked by the curb, letting the engine idle for a moment before turning it off. I sat there staring at the front door, trying to calm the shaking in my hands. I could see the silhouettes through the window, 3 figures sitting in the living room waiting for me. I got out of the car, pulling my coat tighter around me, and walked up the steps to the house I used to call home. The porch light flickered as I reached for the handle, the cold seeping into my bones. I pushed the door open, stepping into the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and old wood, a smell that once felt like comfort. My boots thudded softly on the entryway floor as I took in the sight in front of me. My mom Linda was perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles were white. Dad Mark sat in his recliner, legs crossed, fingers drumming on the armrest. Harper was curled into the corner of the loveseat, hair tied in a messy bun, her eyes darting up to meet mine before dropping to the floor. No one said a word. I shut the door behind me, setting my bag down without taking my eyes off them. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my neck, but I kept my face calm. "We're doing this now," I said, breaking the silence. My mom cleared her throat, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sienna, honey, you look tired. Do you want some tea before we number?" I held up the thick envelope in my hand. "I want to know why I got this in the mail. I want to know why my name is on a $300,000 mortgage for a house I didn't buy." Harper sniffled, her shoulders shaking like she was about to cry. Mom reached over, patting Harper's hand before looking back at me. "Sienna, we were going to explain. It's not what you think." Dad let out a heavy sigh, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "It's exactly what it looks like, actually. We took care of something for the family. Harper needed stability, a place to live. She can't keep throwing money away on rent." I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "So you used my name, my credit." Without asking me, Mom's lips pressed together, her eyes flickering to Dad, then back to me. "Honey, you have a good job. You're making more money now. We know you can handle it, and Harper needs this. She's been going through a lot." Harper finally looked up, her eyes glassy, voice trembling. "I didn't know it would go like this, Sienna. I need a fresh start. A fresh start that I'm supposed to pay for." My voice came out sharp, cracking on the last word. I felt the burn of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Dad's jaw clenched. "We didn't think you'd react like this. We're family, Sienna. Family helps each other. You forged my signature. You committed fraud. You could ruin my credit, my career." Mom's face hardened, the gentle tone dropping. "Don't use words like that. You're being dramatic." I laughed, bitter and short. "Dramatic? You put my entire future on the line for a house I didn't ask for a loan I didn't sign, and you think I'm being dramatic?" Harper let out a small sob, covering her face with her hands. "I can't lose this house, Sienna. Please don't make this harder." I turned to her, anger boiling in my chest. "You made it hard the moment you decided my life, my finances were your safety net." Dad stood up, towering over me, his presence heavy in the room. "Lower your voice. We're not the enemy here. We're your family. Family doesn't steal from each other." Mom shot up from the couch, stepping closer, her voice low. "If you walk out of here now, Sienna, you're turning your back on us. On Harper." My breath came fast, my fists clenching at my sides. I felt like I was 16 again, being told to be quiet, to be good, to do the right thing for the family no matter how much it cost me. I stepped back toward the door, gripping the handle. "If you think I'm going to pay for this, you're wrong." Harper's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Sienna, please, I don't have anywhere else to go." I paused, looking at her, at the fear and guilt on her face, at the way Mom's eyes narrowed, calculating, waiting for me to fold like I always did. Not this time. I opened the door, the cold night air rushing in, and stepped outside, letting it slam shut behind me. For a moment, I stood on the porch, breathing hard, staring at the dark street, the quiet neighborhood, the lights from the window casting a glow behind me. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. When I pulled it out, the screen lit up with a notification that made my blood run cold. It was a text from my mom. "Honey, come back inside. We need to talk. Don't leave like this." I stood on the porch, the cold wind biting at my face as I stared at her message. My hands were trembling, but I turned the handle and stepped back into the house. The air inside felt heavy, thick with tension, the quiet pressing against my ears. Mom was standing in the hallway, her phone still in her hand, her face tight with a forced calm. "Honey, you're doing well. You can help Harper get her life stable again." Dad stood behind her, arms crossed, his jaw tight. Harper sat on the edge of the couch, wiping tears from her cheeks, her eyes red and puffy. I closed the door softly, taking a step forward. "Help her. By letting you steal from me." Mom's eyes flashed, but she kept her voice steady. "We didn't steal from you, Sienna. We helped Harper, and you're in the best position to support her right now." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You forged my signature on a mortgage for $300,000. That's not helping. That's a felony. Harper's lower lip trembled as she looked up at me. I didn't know what else to do, Sienna. I lost my job, and after James left, I had nowhere to go. I just needed something to hold on to. And that something was my credit, my future. I snapped, my voice rising before I forced it back down. Dad stepped forward, his tone hard. Watch your tone. We're your family. Family takes care of each other. Family doesn't commit fraud. Family doesn't ruin your life because they're too afraid to face their own failures. Mom stepped closer, her perfume clouding around me, sweet but suffocating. Don't say things you can't take back. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms. I looked at Harper, who was sobbing softly, shoulders shaking, her hair falling into her face. I wanted to feel sorry for her, but all I felt was anger. Mom's voice cut through the room again, sharp this time. If you don't take responsibility for this, Harper will lose the house. Do you really want your sister to be homeless? My chest tightened, my breath catching. You made this choice, not me. You decided to put her in a house she can't afford, and you decided to do it under my name. Dad's eyes narrowed, his voice low. Don't forget who helped you with your tuition, who put food on the table when you were growing up. My laugh came out harsh, the sound surprising even me. Are you really throwing that at me now? After you stole from me, Harper's sobs grew louder and she buried her face in her hands. Mom reached out, touching my arm, her fingers cold against my skin. Please, Sienna. Just take over the payments. You can afford it, and Harper needs this. I pulled my arm away, stepping back, shaking my head. I'm not paying for a house I didn't agree to, for a loan I didn't sign. Mom's eyes hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. If you call the police, if you take this outside of this house, you will regret it. My voice came out low, trembling, but clear. Are you threatening me? She didn't blink. If you report this, you will no longer be part of this family. You will lose us forever. For a moment, everything felt still. The ticking clock on the wall, Harper's sobs, Dad's heavy breathing, the soft hum of the refrigerator. I looked at them, really looked, and realized this was who they were. I turned toward the door, my hand wrapping around the cold metal knob, my heart pounding as I opened it again and stepped into the cold night air. The cold hit me like a wave as I stepped off the porch, pulling my coat tighter around my body. I needed airspace, anything to keep from screaming. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching over the frost, my breath sharp in the winter night. I could still hear Harper crying inside, Mom's voice tight, Dad's low muttering. I reached my car and leaned against it, pressing my forehead against the cold metal. My phone buzzed again. It was Mom. Come back inside, Sienna. We're not finished. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse pounding in my temples. I didn't want to go back in. I didn't want to hear their excuses, the guilt, the twisting of what they'd done into something I was supposed to feel responsible for. But I turned, walking back up the path, each step heavier than the last. When I opened the door, the warmth of the house wrapped around me, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like a trap. Mom was standing there, arms crossed, her lips pressed tight. Dad was back in his chair, his eyes on me, cold and watchful. Harper sat with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes red, but the tears had stopped. Honey, you're doing well. You can help Harper get her life stable again. I felt something snap inside me, the part that always wanted to be the good daughter, the helper, the fixer. Is that what you think this is? That I should just pay for everything because I have a decent job? Dad leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Harper's been through a lot, you know that. She's trying to start over, and you're in a position to help. I shook my head, my voice low. You didn't even ask me. You took my information, my tax records, and you forged my signature. That's not asking for help. That's stealing. Harper's voice came out small, almost a whisper. I didn't know what else to do, Sienna. After James left and losing my job, I couldn't get approved for anything. So you decided to ruin me instead. You decided that your mistakes were more important than my life. Mom stepped closer, her eyes sharp, her voice sweet but dripping with steel. It's not like that. We're family. We take care of each other. Family doesn't commit fraud. Family doesn't destroy your credit and risk your career. Dad's voice grew rough. You're blowing this out of proportion. We're trying to keep Harper from being homeless. I stared at him, disbelief burning in my chest. Then she shouldn't have bought a house she couldn't afford, and you shouldn't have lied and stolen to make it happen. Harper let out a shaky breath, tears welling again as she clutched the blanket around her. Please, Sienna. I'll lose the house if you don't take over the payments. I don't have anywhere else to go. I swallowed, my throat tight, my fists clenched. That's not my problem. You made your choices. I won't pay for them. Mom's face darkened, her eyes narrowing as she stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you call the police, if you report this, you will regret it. I lifted my chin, anger rising like a flame. Are you threatening me? Her lips curved into a cold smile. If you do this, Sienna, you will be erased from this family. You will lose your parents, your sister, everything. You will be alone. For a moment, the words hit me like a punch. The fear of losing them, the fear of being alone, of having no one to call family tried to wrap around me like chains. Then I looked at her, at Dad, at Harper, and I felt something shift. Maybe that was exactly what I needed. I didn't think my family could threaten me until they did. The drive back to Chicago felt colder than it should have, the sky heavy with clouds that matched the weight in my chest. My phone buzzed every 15 minutes, lighting up with texts from Mom, from Dad, from Harper. Please, Sienna, think about what you're doing. You can't let your sister lose her home over this. Don't ruin your family over a misunderstanding. The words blurred together, flooding my screen as I parked outside my building, my hands numb on the steering wheel. I turned off the car and sat in the silence, the glow of the streetlights catching on the frost building along the windows. I didn't answer any of them. Inside, I dropped my keys on the counter, slipping off my boots and shrugging off my coat, letting it fall to the floor. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to find comforting. Now it felt like the only place I could breathe. I set my phone face down on the table, trying to ignore the buzzing that started again the moment I let go of it. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. It was only when I finally checked my phone that I saw what Harper had done. She had posted a video on Instagram, her face red and blotchy, tears streaming down as she sniffled into the camera. I just don't know what to do anymore, she said, her voice cracking. My sister is trying to take everything from me. I'm going to lose my home and I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't know why she's doing this to me. The comments were pouring in. How could a sister do that? Family is supposed to help each other. Wow, she sounds heartless. I swallowed, my throat dry as I scrolled through the words of strangers who had no idea what was really happening. The likes kept climbing, the shares, the sympathy for Harper. She knew exactly what she was doing. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a coworker. Hey, just saw Harper's story. Are you okay? Is there something going on? Another message from an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw what your sister posted. Hope you can work it out. Family is important. I put the phone down, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes, breathing and trying not to let the frustration crack me open. I walked to my bedroom, pulled open my laptop, and opened a blank document. I started typing out everything that had happened, every detail, every date, every message. If they were going to turn this into a war, I was going to be ready. After an hour, I called Carla. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm but tired. Sienna. What's going on? I took a shaky breath. They used my tax records to take out a mortgage for Harper. They forged my signature, Carla. And now they're trying to make me pay for it. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her processing the words. That's mortgage fraud, Sienna. That's serious. They could face felony charges if you report this. I know, I whispered, sinking into the chair at my desk. But they're my family. Carla's voice softened, but it was firm. Family or not, what they did is illegal. And if you don't protect yourself, you're going to be the one paying for their mistakes. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. I knew she was right. I knew I couldn't let this destroy everything I had built. Carla sighed. We'll figure out the next steps, okay? Just keep all your records, every message, every call. We're going to need it. I stared at the dark screen after Carla hung up, her words echoing in the silence. Every message, every call. Keep everything. I scrolled through my phone screenshotting every text from Mom, Dad, Harper. The ones that said, "You owe us this." The ones that said, "Don't ruin your sister's life." The ones that said, "You're tearing this family apart." Each screenshot felt like another layer of armor, even as it made my chest tighten. Another buzz lit up the screen. It was a message from Aunt Carol. "Your mother told me what's happening. You should be ashamed. Family takes care of family. Harper needs you." I let out a humorless laugh, tossing the phone onto the couch, the screen lighting up again. Another message, another guilt trip. I needed air. I grabbed my coat, pulling it around me as I stepped onto my small balcony. The cold air stung my cheeks, the city lights below me blinking like scattered stars. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cold, grounding myself. My phone rang, vibrating against the cushions inside. I let it ring. When I went back in, Harper's story was still up. She had posted another one, her eyes red, her voice cracking as she wiped tears from her face. "I just want to keep my home," she said. "I just want to live without fear. My sister is trying to take everything from me, and I don't know why she's doing this." I clenched my jaw, my hands curling into fists. The comments were flooding in. "How could your sister do this? I'm so sorry you're going through this. Sending prayers, stay strong." She knew exactly what she was doing. She was making me the villain to everyone who would listen. Another message came in, this time from Mark, my father. "Enough of this. You need to step up and do what's right. Don't force us to take action." My chest tightened as I read it again, the words twisting like a knife. "Don't force us to take action." I typed back, my fingers shaking. "You forged my signature. I will not pay for your crimes." I hit send before I could overthink it, tossing the phone aside. I paced the apartment, the walls closing and my reflection in the window looking back at me, tired, angry, scared. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I opened my laptop, searching mortgage fraud penalties, reading line after line of consequences. Felony. Prison time. Fines. Lives ruined, and it wasn't even my crime. A knock at the door made me jump, the sound sharp in the quiet. My heart pounded as I moved toward it, peeking through the peephole. A man in a dark jacket stood there, holding a large envelope, looking down at something on a clipboard. I opened the door a few inches. "Sienna Miller." "Yes." He didn't look up as he handed me the envelope. "You've been served." He turned and walked down the hallway before I could even react. I closed the door with a soft click, the envelope heavy in my hands, the world suddenly too quiet. I tore it open, my eyes scanning the first lines, my breath catching in my throat. Plaintiffs Linda Miller, Mark Miller, defendant Sienna Miller, amount in dispute $300. They were suing me. My parents were suing me for the mortgage they stole. I never thought the day would come when my own parents would sue me. I stood in the middle of my living room, the lawsuit papers trembling in my hands. The words blurred as I tried to focus, the weight of what they meant pressing down on my chest. They really did it. They turned me into the enemy. My phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with a new message from Harper. "I'm so sorry, Sienna. I didn't know they were going to do this. But I really can't lose this house. Please, can we just work this out?" I read it twice, the anger simmering under my skin. She was playing innocent, but she knew. She knew they used my name, my records, and now she was begging me to fix it while pretending she had no part in it. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my keys and the papers, locking up behind me as I headed out into the cold. The wind stung my cheeks as I walked to my car, the city lights blurred by the tears I refused to let fall. I drove straight to the office of Lucas Grant, a lawyer Carla had recommended. The building was a tall glass structure downtown, the kind that smelled like coffee and printer paper the moment you walked in. Lucas met me in the lobby, extending a firm hand, his dark hair streaked with gray eyes sharp behind thin glasses. "Sienna, come on in." We sat across from each other in a small conference room. The lawsuit spread out between us as I explained everything. The mortgage, the forgery, the harassment, the Instagram stories, the texts. Lucas listened without interrupting, tapping a pen lightly against his notepad. When I finished, he leaned back, folding his hands. "This is a mess, but it's not your mess to pay for. What they did is mortgage fraud, plain and simple." I swallowed, my throat dry. "They're my parents. Lucas nodded slowly. I get that, but family or not, they broke the law. And now they're suing you to force you to pay for their crime. My hands tightened around the edge of the chair. Can they win? His eyes met mine steady. This case has no legal ground, but they can drag it out, make it expensive, stressful, and emotionally draining until you give in. I exhaled, shakily pressing my hands to my forehead. I can't believe they're doing this to me. Lucas leaned forward, his voice calm. Listen to me. We're going to fight this, but I need everything you have. Emails, texts, any communication. Bank statements. Anything that proves they used your information without your consent. I nodded, wiping at my eyes quickly before the tears could fall. I've kept everything. Good, Lucas said. This is going to be ugly, Sienna. They're going to try to guilt you to spin this to make you look like the villain. Don't let them. I looked up at him, the reality settling in. This was happening. My family was taking me to court and I would have to fight them. I left his office with a folder of instructions and a mind spinning with fear and anger. The drive home felt like a blur, the streets empty, the lights streaking past me as I gripped the wheel. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes and headed straight for my laptop. I pulled up my emails, scrolling back through years of messages, looking for anything, everything that would prove what they had done. My heart pounded as I opened folder after folder, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark room, the quiet broken only by the sound of me breathing. I clicked on another folder, pulling up old emails Mom had sent me about taxes. Scrolling, scanning, breathing too fast, I forced myself to focus on each subject line, each date. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, eyes darting across the screen, looking for anything that could prove what they did. A notification popped up. Another text from Harper. Please, Sienna. I didn't want this. Can we just fix it quietly? I ignored it, clicking into an email thread titled Harper House Docs. Mom's message was at the top. We got the numbers we needed from her last return. This will get approved. My stomach dropped as I clicked into the attachment, seeing the scanned pages of my tax documents, my social security number, my signature on forms I had never seen. Another reply from Dad followed. Just let her freak out. She'll pay once she realizes we're serious. My chest tightened, a mix of nausea and rage swirling as I highlighted the emails, saving them into a new folder marked evidence. They planned it. They knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't care what it would do to me. A sharp knock on my door made me jump, my hands freezing over the keyboard. I closed the laptop, slowly standing, listening to the second knock, harder this time. I walked to the door, looking through the peephole. A delivery man in a dark jacket stood there holding a thick envelope. My heart pounded as I opened the door a crack. Sienna Miller. Yes. He handed me the envelope without meeting my eyes. You've been served. I stood there, the cold air rushing into the apartment as I held the envelope, my hands shaking. The door clicked shut behind me, the silence pressing in. I ripped the envelope open, my eyes scanning the first lines. Notice of deposition. Mandatory appearance. They were pushing forward with the lawsuit, demanding I appear in court, demanding I answer for the mortgage they had stolen in my name. I sank onto the floor, the papers spread out around me, my breathing shallow. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady the panic building, the betrayal burning hot in my veins. My phone buzzed again. Harper. Please, Sienna. Don't do this. Don't ruin the family. I clenched my jaw, tossing the phone aside, letting it buzz against the hardwood floor. I looked down at the papers, at the evidence folder on my laptop still glowing on the table, and felt the fear shift, hardening into something else. Resolve. They wanted me to be scared, to fold, to give in. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I reached for my phone, taking a slow breath before typing out a message to Lucas. I found the proof. We're going to fight this. As I hit send, a single line from Dad's email echoed in my mind. Let her freak out. She'll pay once she realizes we're serious. I wiped the tears from my face, my eyes sharp as I stared at the screen. They were about to find out how serious I could be. They thought I would stay quiet. They were wrong. The next morning I sat at my kitchen table, the sunlight creeping across stacks of printed emails and court papers. I pulled out my phone and dialed the mortgage company, my hand steady for the first time in days. I need to report mortgage fraud, I said, when the agent answered. The woman on the other end was polite but firm, asking for documents, timelines, and names. I gave her everything, my voice calm, as I explained how my parents had stolen my information, forged my signature, and forced a loan in my name. After the call, I logged into my credit accounts, clicking through the steps to freeze my credit. Each confirmation email felt like a small victory, a barrier I was putting up to protect what was mine. Lucas called that afternoon. Good work, Sienna. This strengthens our case. Now we file a formal police report. My throat tightened. Are you sure? His voice was clear. Yes. This isn't just a family matter anymore. It's a crime. I exhaled, pressing my palm to my forehead, nodding even though he couldn't see me. Okay. Let's do it. The next day, I walked into the precinct with a folder of evidence clutched to my chest. The officer at the desk took my statement, his eyes scanning the documents as I explained piece by piece how my parents had stolen from me. When I walked out of the station, the cold air hit my face, and for a moment I felt lighter. But it didn't last. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Harper. Her voice was shaky, words tumbling out too fast. Sienna, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mom told me to practice signing your name. I didn't know it would turn into this. Please, please don't let them take the house. I don't know where I'll go. I sat there in the dark, listening to her words on repeat, the guilt trying to creep back and twisting around my spine. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Lucas. Evidence, he texted back. Stay strong. But the fallout started to spread. At work, I could feel the stares. Whispers in the break room. Harper's posts were still up, people siding with her, calling me cold, heartless. My boss called me into his office, his brow furrowed as he gestured for me to sit. Is everything okay at home, Sienna? This situation with your family, it's creating noise. I held his gaze, keeping my voice even. It's a private legal matter. I'm handling it. He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes, the doubt. When I got back to my desk, I found Carla's text waiting for me. Ignore the noise. You're doing the right thing. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before diving back into the spreadsheet in front of me. I had bills to pay, work to finish, and a fight I couldn't walk away from. That night, I didn't bother turning on the lights when I got home. I dropped my bag by the door, kicking off my shoes, the apartment echoing with the quiet. I could still hear Harper's voicemail in my head, her shaky voice begging me to stop. I pulled leftovers from the fridge, microwaving them while staring at the tile floor, the hum of the machine loud in the silence. As I ate, I checked my phone, another message waiting from Harper. Please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm scared, Sienna. I scrolled back through her previous texts, each one swinging between guilt and begging, fear and manipulation. I set the phone down, my fork pausing halfway to my mouth. My appetite was gone, the cold food untouched, as I leaned back, closing my eyes. Later, I called Lucas, pacing the kitchen as the phone rang. Lucas picked up, his voice steady. You okay? I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Harper is panicking. She admitted in a voicemail that Mom told her to practice signing my name. Good, he said. That's leverage. She's scared because she knows it's a crime. I stopped pacing, gripping the edge of the counter. She's still my sister. Lucas paused before speaking. I know, but you have to protect yourself. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I know. We hung up and I went back to my laptop, opening the voicemail again, saving it into a folder labeled Evidence, the sound of Harper's fear filling the room. Please don't let them take the house. I didn't know it would turn into this. I pressed pause, letting the silence settle. I opened my banking app, checking my accounts, ensuring every fraud alert was in place. I checked the locks on my credit, the freezing complete, a small layer of protection that felt necessary. The next morning at work, I could feel eyes following me as I walked to my desk. Mara from HR gave me a small, pitying smile I ignored as I set down my coffee. Tom came by before lunch, tapping lightly on the partition. You holding up? I nodded, forcing a smile. I'm good, Tom. Thank you. He didn't move. If you need to talk, I'm fine. He sighed, leaving me with the silence that returned as I stared at the spreadsheet in front of me, the numbers blurring as I forced myself to focus. When lunch came, I went outside sitting on a cold bench with my coffee scrolling through my messages. Carla had sent a check-in text. "You okay?" I typed back, "I will be." A message popped up while I was walking back to the office. It was Harper again. "They're saying I might get charged too. Please don't let this happen." I paused, fingers hovering over the screen before locking my phone and shoving it into my pocket. I couldn't let her fear twist into my guilt again. That evening I stayed late at work, finishing reports, cleaning out old files, anything to keep my mind from spiraling. By the time I left, the streets were empty, the cold air biting at my skin as I pulled my coat tighter around me. When I got home, I dropped my keys on the table, the metal clattering against the wood, echoing in the quiet. I changed into sweats, pulling a blanket around me as I settled onto the couch, exhaustion pulling at every part of me. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it thinking it might be Carla or Lucas. No name, no photo. Just one sentence on the screen. "You'll regret it if you send your family to prison." I stared at the message, the glow of the screen burning into my eyes. "You'll regret it if you send your family to prison." My thumb hovered over the delete button before I locked the phone and tossed it on the table. My hands were shaking, but I let them. I wasn't the same daughter they thought I was. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse, the cold Chicago wind whipping around me, the gray stone of the Cook County building towering above. Lucas stood beside me, flipping through the file in his hands, his breath visible in the air. "You ready?" I nodded, pulling in a deep breath. I was ready. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything feel harsher, the benches hard beneath me as I sat waiting. Across the aisle, Mom and Dad sat together, Mom's eyes red, clutching a tissue in her hand. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, hands folded in his lap. Harper sat a few seats down, her hair tied back, shoulders hunched, her eyes darting up to meet mine before dropping again. Lucas leaned over, his voice low. "Remember, Sienna, this isn't about family. This is about the law." I swallowed, nodding, gripping the edge of the bench until my knuckles turned white. When the judge entered, the room fell into a heavy silence, the sound of the gavel sharp as it echoed. "We are here for Miller versus Thayers Thady and as D Esaways Ba. Miller regarding allegations of identity theft and financial fraud." My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face calm, eyes forward. Lucas stood, his voice steady, clear. "Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is a case of deliberate financial fraud committed against my client Sienna Miller by the plaintiffs Linda and Mark Miller." Mom let out a small sob, covering her mouth with her hand. Dad closed his eyes, his shoulders dropping. Harper shifted in her seat, her eyes filling with tears. Lucas continued, presenting the documents, the emails, the recorded voicemail from Harper. The judge flipped through each page, her face unreadable, the quiet clicks of paper filling the room. "Your Honor, here is clear evidence that Linda and Mark Miller used Sienna's tax documents without her consent, forging her signature to secure a mortgage loan under her name." Mom shook her head, her voice cracking as she spoke up. "She's our daughter, we were helping her sister. Family helps family." Lucas didn't flinch. "Family does not commit fraud, ma'am." Harper was called to the stand, her hands trembling as she adjusted the microphone. "Harper," Lucas said, his voice calm, "did you know that forging your sister's signature is a crime?" Harper's eyes filled, tears slipping down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I didn't know it would turn into this. Mom told me to practice. I didn't want to lose the house." Lucas nodded, his tone even. "But you knew you were signing your sister's name, correct?" Harper's lips trembled, her voice a whisper. "Yes." Mom let out a cry, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Dad sat frozen, staring down at the floor. The judge raised a hand, her voice firm. "That's enough for today. I will review the evidence and testimonies." I sat there, breathing slow, letting the weight of the moment sink in. I wasn't the daughter they thought they could silence anymore. I stared at the message, the glow of the screen cold against my face. "You'll regret it if you send your family to prison." I turned the phone over, letting it fall onto the couch, the screen going black. My hands were shaking, but I let them. Tomorrow I would face them in court, and I wouldn't be the daughter they could silence anymore. The next morning, the sky over Chicago was gray as I pulled on my black coat and walked toward the Cook County Courthouse. Lucas met me outside, his expression calm, papers tucked under his arm. Ready, I nodded, pulling in a breath that felt like it would crack my ribs. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh, the marble floors cold under my boots as we walked toward courtroom 4. My eyes found them immediately. Mom clutching a crumpled tissue in her hand, her eyes already red. Dad sitting rigid beside her, his jaw-locked, hands folded tightly. Harper in a navy sweater, her hair pulled back, her eyes wide and wet as they flickered toward me before dropping again. I sat down across from them, feeling the air tighten around us, every breath sharp, the quiet humming in my ears. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge entered, her black robe swaying as she took her seat, glasses perched low on her nose. We are here today regarding Miller versus Miller concerning allegations of financial fraud and identity theft. Lucas stood, his voice firm, clear. Your Honor, this is not a family squabble. This is a clear case of mortgage fraud, identity theft, and the deliberate misuse of my client's personal and financial information without her consent. Mom let out a sharp cry, shaking her head. She's our daughter. We were helping her sister. Family is supposed to help family. Lucas didn't flinch. Family does not commit federal crimes against family, ma'am. Dad's shoulders slumped, his eyes locked on the floor. Harper pressed her lips together, tears slipping down her cheeks as the judge turned to her. Miss Harper Miller, please take the stand. Harper stood slowly, walking with small steps, her shoulders hunched as she sat adjusting the microphone with shaking hands. Lucas stepped forward, his voice even. Harper, did you sign your sister's name on mortgage documents? Her breath caught, her eyes flicking to Mom, who shook her head violently, mouthing, Don't. Harper's voice broke. Mom told me to practice. She said it was the only way. I didn't want to lose the house. Lucas nodded, his tone calm but direct. Harper, did you know it was illegal to sign your sister's name? Harper sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. Mom let out a loud sob, grabbing Dad's arm, her face crumpling as she rocked back and forth. The judge raised her hand sharply. That is enough. The room fell silent, the air thick, heavy, every breath loud in the quiet. Lucas placed the printed emails, the voicemail transcript, the forged documents on the evidence cart. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Linda and Mark Miller, with the help of Harper Miller, knowingly committed mortgage fraud under Sienna Miller's name. Mom's cries grew louder, echoing in the cold room while Dad kept his head low, refusing to look up, his face pale. Harper was shaking, wiping tears with trembling hands. The judge adjusted her glasses, looking at each of us, her gaze steady. I will review the testimony and evidence provided. She paused, letting the silence stretch, the weight of it pressing on every shoulder in the room. I will deliver my ruling next week. The gavel came down sharp, final, the sound ringing in the heavy air as the bailiff called for everyone to rise. I stood, my legs trembling, the world tilting slightly as I looked across the room at them. Mom with tears streaking her face, her lips moving, as if praying. Dad silent, small in his seat. Harper shaking, eyes swollen and red. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, the cold air outside hitting me like a wave, the world feeling bigger, heavier, as I stepped out into whatever would come next. The cold air outside hit me like a wave, clearing the heaviness from my lungs as I walked down the courthouse steps. When justice speaks, the truth needs no defense. That week felt like the longest of my life. Every morning I woke up, checked my phone, checked my email, waiting for Lucas's message. I went to work, tried to focus, answered emails, joined meetings, but every moment was filled with the tension of waiting. At night, I lay awake, the glow of the city lights sneaking through the blinds as I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word from the courtroom, every look from Mom, the way Harper's voice had cracked when she admitted what she did. On Thursday afternoon, as I was reviewing a budget report at my desk, my phone buzzed. It was from Lucas. Subject: we won. My hands trembled as I clicked it open, my heart pounding in my ears. Sienna, the judge has dismissed the case with prejudice. Your parents have been ordered to pay court costs and a 90-day no-contact order is in effect immediately. I read it twice, the words blurring before coming into focus again. Dismissed. No contact. Free. I let out a shaky breath, leaning back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as tears filled my eyes. The weight pressing on my chest cracked, letting in air I hadn't felt in months. Lucas's follow-up email arrived minutes later. Also, the bank has sent Harper a foreclosure warning. Since the mortgage was fraudulent, they will proceed with recovery unless the debt is settled. I set my phone down, pressing my palms to my face, exhaling slowly. It wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was relief, a quiet peace I hadn't felt in so long, even if it came with the cost of losing pieces of my family. That weekend, I spent Saturday morning at the bank sitting with a financial advisor as we started the long process of repairing my credit. We filed disputes, closed old accounts, and flagged the fraudulent mortgage for removal. "You're doing the right thing," the advisor told me, her voice gentle. I nodded, signing the papers, feeling each signature as a reclaiming of my own life. At home, I opened the windows, letting in the sharp spring air as I cleaned the apartment, scrubbing the kitchen, vacuuming every corner, tossing out papers I didn't need, clearing the clutter that had built up during the chaos. I found my old gym bag under the bed, pulling it out, shaking off the dust before packing it with my running shoes, a towel, a water bottle. That evening, I walked into the gym, scanning my card at the front desk, the familiar scent of rubber mats and sweat in the air. I stepped onto the treadmill, pressing the button, feeling it hum to life beneath me. I ran my feet, hitting the belt in a steady rhythm, my heart pounding, sweat dripping down my back, but it wasn't fear this time, it was freedom. Afterward, I walked home, the cool breeze brushing against my damp skin, the streetlights glowing softly, the city alive around me. Back in my apartment, I showered, pulled on clean clothes, and made a simple dinner, sitting at the small table by the window, eating slowly, tasting every bite for the first time in months. I washed my dish, wiped down the counter, and settled onto the couch with a cup of tea, the quiet of the room, finally feeling like peace instead of loneliness. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, expecting a work notification, but it was from Harper. No photo, no emoji. Just a single message. "I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" I set the phone down on the coffee table, the message pulsing in the quiet. "I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" I sat there, my breath steady, letting the words hang in the air. I thought about Harper's voice in court, the tears, the way she wouldn't look at me. I thought about the voicemail, her sobs when she said she didn't know it would go this far. And I thought about how she signed my name anyway. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering, then typed slowly. "I need time." I hit send, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I placed the phone down face first, turning away, as if I could turn away from the memory of everything she had helped them do. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the streetlights cutting lines across the walls. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the creak of the building, settling the sound of my own breath as I counted it, trying to slow the thoughts in my mind. Mom's tears in court. Dad's silence. Harper's voice breaking. My own voice steady, telling the truth. When the sun started to rise, I got out of bed, pulling on leggings and a hoodie. I tied my shoes, stepping out into the crisp morning air, the cold biting against my skin. I started to run, the pavement steady under my feet, the city still quiet, the sky streaked with pink and orange. With every step, I felt pieces of them falling away from me. Their expectations, their guilt, the fear they tried to plant in me. It fell behind me, block by block, breath by breath. When I got home, I showered, the hot water washing away the sweat, the cold, the tension. I dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, making coffee, the scent warm and grounding. I sat at my small table, steam rising from the cup as I checked my email. An update from Lucas sat in my inbox. "Sienna, the court officially closed the case this morning. They cannot reopen it. The bank has started foreclosure proceedings on the house. Your credit will continue clearing over the next 60 days. Let me know if you need anything." I closed my eyes, letting the relief fill me, slow and quiet, not the loud victory I once imagined, but enough. I cleaned the apartment that afternoon, moving slowly, folding laundry, wiping down the counters, sweeping the floors. I threw out old papers, shredded documents, letting the past clear out of drawers and corners. Later, I went to the grocery store, pushing a cart through the aisles, picking out vegetables, fruit, coffee, bread, small pieces of normal I was ready to reclaim. At the checkout, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, expecting a work email, a receipt notification. Unknown number. "You think this is over?" I blinked, reading it again, the letters sharp on the screen. "You think this is over?" The cashier spoke, pulling me back. "Miss, do you need a bag?" I swallowed, forcing a small smile. Yes, thank you. I took the bag, walking out into the parking lot, the cold wind brushing against my face as I tightened my grip on the groceries. I sat in the car, locking the doors, staring at the message again, the weight of it sinking in. They thought I would break. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. I drove home in silence, the message still hanging in my mind like a shadow. You think this is over? I pulled into my parking spot, turning off the engine, sitting there as the cold crept in. I thought about everything they had taken, everything they had tried to take, and what they could never touch again. I went upstairs, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and hung up my coat. The apartment smelled like coffee and laundry detergent, warm and safe, a small world I had built by myself. My phone buzzed on the counter. Harper? I opened it, her message popping up, desperate, soft. Please, Sienna. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can you ever forgive me? I stared at the words, my thumb hovering, memories flooding in. Harper calling at midnight, crying because she couldn't pay her car insurance. Mom's voice telling me to cover Harper's rent just this once. The way they looked at me when I said no for the first time. The mortgage papers, my name signed in ink I never held. I set the phone down, walking to the window, the city lights stretching out, blinking alive. The glass felt cold against my hand as I leaned on it, breathing slowly. Forgiveness didn't mean I had to let her back in. Forgiveness didn't mean I had to let her hurt me again. I picked up the phone, typing slowly. I hope you find a way to take responsibility for your own life. I hit send, placing the phone face down, letting the quiet fill the room. The next morning, I woke early, pulling on leggings and a sweatshirt, heading to the gym as the sky turned pale with sunrise. I ran the treadmill, humming under me, my heart pounding, sweat dripping down my back, but it was clean, honest work, not fear. At work, I finished my reports, joined meetings, laughed quietly when Mara made a bad joke about coffee, letting the small joys return one by one. That evening, I sat in a small room with 6 other women, folding my hands in my lap as I listened to them speak. We were all there for the same reason: family, financial abuse. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat, the words coming out steady. They thought I would break, I said, but I didn't. They nodded, some smiling, some with tears in their eyes, as I shared how I had fought, how I had learned that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. When I left, the air outside felt cold and sharp, but it felt like freedom. I walked home, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, the hum of cars, the faint music from a passing window. I opened my door, stepping into the warm light of my apartment, closing it softly behind me, letting the quiet wrap around me like a promise. I stood by the window, looking out at Chicago, breathing in, breathing out, ready to begin again. The city lights blinked below, tiny sparks against the deep night sky, the hum of Chicago steady and alive. I stepped back from the window, pulling on a soft sweater, tying my hair up as I moved around the apartment. I opened the fridge, pulling out leftovers, reheating them quietly, the beep of the microwave the only sound in the room. As I sat at the table, I checked my phone, the message from Harper still there. I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me? I placed the phone down, letting the silence answer for me as I took a bite, chewing slowly, letting myself taste the food for once instead of swallowing around anxiety. I remembered the years she called for small things: gas, money, phone, bills, rent. The way Mom would call her, voice sweet, layered with guilt. She's your sister, Sienna. You have a good job. You can help. And I did. Until I couldn't anymore. I finished my dinner, rinsing the plate, placing it on the rack to dry. I wiped down the counters, the simple motions steadying me. The next morning, I put on jeans and a jacket, walking through the cold morning air toward the community center. My boots crunched on the icy sidewalk, my breath clouding in front of me. Inside, the room smelled like coffee and old wood, the circle of chairs already half full. Women sat quietly, holding cups, some looking down, some looking at me as I found a seat. The facilitator smiled, her voice warm. We're glad you're here, Sienna. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm cup, listening as they spoke. Stories of bank accounts, drained credit cards, open dreams stolen in the name of family. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat, my voice even. I thought helping meant love. I thought saying no made me selfish. But I learned protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. A few women nodded, one reaching over to squeeze my hand, her eyes glassy with quiet understanding. After the meeting, I walked home, the winter sun shining, the wind cold but somehow gentle. I stopped by a coffee shop, ordering a latte, standing by the window as I waited, watching people pass, each lost in their own world. My phone buzzed. Harper again. I just need you to forgive me, please, Sienna. I sipped the coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest as I typed. I hope you learn to take responsibility for your life. I sent it, sliding the phone into my pocket, stepping back outside, the wind catching my hair, the sky clear above the city. That evening I cleaned out the last drawer of old papers, shredding documents tied to them, letting the pages fall away in pieces, the weight of each memory lifting with the soft hiss of the shredder. I pulled on a hoodie, stepping onto the balcony, the lights of Chicago stretching far, the cold air clean as I inhaled deeply. I had lost them. But I had found myself. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of what came next. What would you have done if you were me?